An example of engagement. Here's an example of engagement for one manufacturing location with 205 employees. They held monthly all-employee meetings, one per shift. 65% minimum project team involvement. 14 active problem-solving teams on average with 9 people per team. 8 hours of training for all team members. 8 additional hours of leader training. The annual plan drove all improvement efforts for the site. There were monthly half-day team leader meetings. The facility shut down 1 hour per shift each week for meetings, and team meeting and training costs were built into the standard cost for the product. 90% of supervisors served as team leaders, and the process teams were self-directed. There was one full-time facilitator with an 8-person steering committee that met weekly. The teams and individuals saved over $1 million per year in late 1980s dollars. I would not begin to tell you that every location I've worked at did a great job of engaging its people. In truth, I'd say that we made some really significant progress at 3 of the 6 places I've been, and we struggled at 3 of the others. I experienced the first of my 3 success stories during the latter 5 years of the 1980s. At this manufacturing location, I had the chance to see an effective employee engagement system truly work well. This was long before the term engagement was in use, however. Employee involvement or participative management was all the buzz back then. We had it at this plant, and it worked well. After learning a lot during those 5 years, it became my mission to replicate this system as best I could at the next 3 places I worked at, with some modifications being made due to workforce, cultural, and process differences. This 5-year experience had convinced me that people make the difference and gave me my initial blueprint for sustaining process excellence. The above list details the variety of approaches we use to engage people at this location. Employee involvement was truly a part of the work culture at this plant, and to my knowledge, it still is today, more than 40 years later. Employee involvement worked at this plant because people were hired into management with the intent of supporting this approach. Efforts were also made to effectively support the approaches listed above on a daily basis, and most importantly, the team approach was integrated into the way the plant operated on a day-in and day-out basis. The work teams were just as effective as the project and focus teams, and they all worked in a manner that supported the operating plan and balanced metrics for the site. Many would look at the above list and think, boy, this must have cost a lot of time and money. While this may be a true statement, what is not reflected in the above list are the increased profits in business volume that were realized because of these approaches. These financial gains were realized because great people were consistently given the chance to develop and contribute. Example Team Infrastructure Blueprint. The above blueprint represents a basic team infrastructure for a 100-person food manufacturer. In this example, the organization has all 3 types of teams in place. They have 10 work teams, 6 focus teams, and 7 project teams, for a total of 23 active teams. An organization with this type of infrastructure would be considered as fairly mature from a team infrastructure perspective. Such a blueprint can be a great tool to use in determining both your current level employee engagement and possible enhanced engagement scenarios for the future. The key question to ask, however, will be, how will we gauge the effectiveness of each team? Note that with this type of infrastructure for a 100-person company, either 23% of the employees need to have team leadership skills, or some people will lead more than one team. In my experience, the latter has often been more the case, with some leaders attempting to lead as many as 4 or 5 teams at a time. In my opinion, such a multi-team leadership approach is both risky and excessive. Even when the best team leader can lose their focus if these teams are not made up of people who are skilled in supporting the team process. This blueprint also shows how the different teams and team types are deployed across the workforce. Engagement, in other words. It can be used to show how many people are involved on each team. You can look at the totals at the bottom of the blueprint. Your goal over time should be to obtain a good mix of people from different functional groups, departments in many cases, and levels from all of your teams. If your site has fewer than 60 or so people, you can set up this blueprint using the names of your people instead of a department in most of the rows. Using this approach helps you manage the number of teams that each person is on, and it helps you identify which groups may need to get more involved. Also, keep in mind that this tool can be site-specific or organization-wide. DVG Team Infrastructure. The table shown above depicts the team infrastructure we had at the flavored syrup company where I served as a plant manager. What would the team infrastructure look like for the facility where you work? You can use the following table to lay out your own team infrastructure. So notice in our example, over on the left-hand side, we have our focus teams, and we have 8 different focus teams. Typically, your focus teams are strongly aligned with your strategic objectives. So in this plant, we had 8 areas where we consistently tried to improve year over year. Those made up some of our strategic objectives. Those were our focus teams. These were standing teams. They met on a regular basis. Their membership may change some, but often it was the people that were responsible for those objectives and their project teams that led that effort. On the right-hand side, we have our process work teams, and these are the people that work together on a regular basis, and in some cases, we had multiple teams per shift, but those are just the example of the different teams that we would have on the process work team side. And then in the center, we have our project teams, and these would be the improvement projects that are most likely to improve the performance of the organization at the current time. And they are almost always staffed by the same people that are on the focus teams and on work teams. So there's a limit to how many project teams you can have, both in terms of available team leaders and just the sheer number of teams that people can be on, period. So feel free to draw out your own team infrastructure. Don't be surprised if you've got some redundancy there, and look for some options to optimize the way things are designed and possibly even engage more people with fewer teams. How engaged do you want your people to be? This is group exercise number 5. What percent of your employees are engaged in your current process improvement efforts? How high should this percentage be in an organization? How well designed is your team infrastructure? Those are just some questions to think about as you're setting up your engagement plan. And I think engagement is something that you should not leave for chance. It needs to be built into the job designs and the team infrastructure of the site or the organization. So for a site, a leadership team can use a matrix similar to the one shown below to identify the degree of employee engagement you're willing to pursue and support as a group. Follow these instructions to complete the matrix. So first of all, notice we've got different types of engagement as rows on the left-hand side of the table. We've got a section for current engagement percent for 5 different organizational groups or site groups. And then we have the same 5 site groups at desired engagement percentages. So the first goal here is to determine the time frame for the desired engagement percentage assignment. So in other words, is this looking out 1 year, looking out 2 years, looking out 3 years, whatever. Once you've determined that time frame and you write it in the blank, then you reach consensus on the different engagement dimensions you're going to use. That would be the different types of engagement we see as rows on the left-hand side. Once you've done that, you can estimate the current levels of engagement that exist for each dimension and employee group. You can project the desired level of engagement you'd like to pursue by dimension and group. Look for your largest gaps and identify some ways to possibly close those gaps over the time frame identified. Enjoy the exercise and keep improving.